Hello Lionel fans. Today we have a 397 coal loader, post-war coal loader here. We're going to maintenance. I'm going to show you everything that you need to work on this, everything that we can oil. I'm going to show you how to get this belt on and off in case you have to replace a belt. I've already worked on the motor, cleaned the armature, and cleaned the brushes. We can replace the brushes if they're oil soaked or if they're worn. These looked really good and clean. I had to unsolder this wire, and it was too short to slide this piece off to get to the motor, so I've resoldered it with this extra distance here. It was wrapped around a couple wraps there. They soldered it pretty tight from the factory. They shouldn't have done it like that. It makes it hard to surface. And the gear case had a lot of grease in it, but it was getting dried out, and we're going to re-grease everything. These gears are all going to get fresh grease. I've got them all cleaned off. This guy has bushings on the end of it. You grease underneath there, and it will slide back down into here real easily. And that's the first gear shaft that's off the armature shaft, so it's getting the most torque. And it sits in the brass bushings, whereas the other one, this just sits in aluminum here. And that's another good reason why you want to keep this stuff lubed. Just sitting down in aluminum with no bushings that you can replace. You know, it could wear out this housing if it ran without oil for long enough. So I'm going to get all this coated with grease. We're going to reassemble it, and we'll go to the next step. Alright, I've got the gearbox all greased up, and I like to put enough grease in there that I don't think that I'm going to have to grease this thing again. Could be wrong, but I like to overdo it rather than underdo it. I'd rather clean up some grease coming out of the sides of it. One trick that I do, like this is where the bottom of the motor armature is going, and it's going to sit like this. So I'll pile up the grease on the uphill side of it, because the grease is going to drip oil down onto there for years until the grease dries up. And put a bunch of excess in here around all these different pivots, so that theoretically, even if the grease is flung off the gears after a while, it can still seep in, kind of like an oil wick on a Lionel train. You oil it and it seeps and it gets onto different bushings. Now I've got the motor reassembled here. The gear case is all lubed up. Spinning the armature, it's spinning real smooth, it feels great. And I started with the motor because you need to get that off of there and out of the way with this grommet in here. You can't slide this shaft straight up out of these bosses like we're going to do now. So you take the motor off, get it out of the way, and then the next step is you would take this out, move that up out of the way. Need to remove this spring, and that's got everything freed up, but it's still held in with these plates. These are oil ports. I'm going to take these screws out next, and we're going to pull that shaft out. Alright, we've got these bearing plates removed here, so now you can pull the shaft up out of there. These cams, you have to keep them in the correct direction so we can pull this bearing off. I'm going to put grease in here. You know, it has that oil port, but I'm going to use some grease and I can oil it again later if I want. So this thing on that square shaft, kind of a rectangle shaft it looks like, these cams are handed. So then you can get the shaft out of here. And I'll leave this cam on there. I'll line the other one with it. A little bit of grease and oil in there. Now, let's turn this guy back over. There we go. Got that out of there. These metal clips, make sure those are still there. This thing slides on there. And it's jiggling around. Now after I get the clip spread a little bit, take the pliers, on the end of this horseshoe clip. I pop it like that. Let me take this pin out. Don't want to scratch it. I took some of the elastic pressure off. So we got to remember the top, the way this belt is. So this is going to be the top. With this like this, it has to lift the coal up. And then this metal was at the bottom of the chute. So then plastic roller. The plastic roller down there. This little tray is supposed to keep the little pieces of coal from jamming up inside this guy. I was looking in the service manual. They're showing some tips for this thing. Alright, we're going to get the belt back on here. Like we said, the belt's handed. This is going to be the top. And it's going to come up this way. Stretch this rubber band on here. And see, the hole's not quite lined up for the pin because of the tension on this guy. So this is the tricky part. Remember, this went down like that. What if I should put a little oil on this guy? Probably wouldn't hurt, huh? Alright, so with this thing out of the way, if we can slide this tension up on the rubber band, well, how about if we put a screwdriver in from the other side? How about that? Look at that. Now I can move the pin, move the screwdriver like a pin. Get that lined up. Oh yeah, look at that. And then, so I used a round little Phillips, so it's still off there. Try a little bitty screwdriver in here. Push this like this maybe. Oh. There we go. Got to get tension off that pin to get that guy in there. It's not easy, is it? Alright, wow. Alright, so that's it. Got to get our horseshoe clip back on. Alright, now we've got our clip back on. There's our 2-position clicking. Yeah, we have a little rust and corrosion on this one. Now these cleats here, from when this end was peened together, these get in the way if you're just trying to put this in here like this, it's hitting, and then it looks like maybe there's some clearance right in there for them. So it looked like it needs to go down in like this. Look at that, see, now it's inside of there. See, they had to accommodate and plan for everything at that train factory. I think sometimes they were pulling their hair out trying to design this stuff. Now let's check our handing of the belt again. That's correct. It's going to lift the coal up the chute. We're going to grease all this stuff up. There's the cams in there that the other cams hit on. And remember, if the coal was going to one side of your chute or the other, if the cam was hitting one of these sides first, it said that you can move these things, hit it sharply with a screwdriver is what it said. And you can see it's kind of pressed in there with these little brads almost pressed into those steel plates. So boy, that would probably be tough to do. Okay, we have some grease inside of that bushing. Let's go ahead and slide this guy in here. This is a square shaft. It'll kind of look like it was a rectangle shaft at first, but it's square. It goes in either way. So we see how this cam is right here with that tooth sitting like that. Got to make sure this one is sitting the same way. So it's going to go like that. Let me get some grease on this guy. Had a big tub of this red grease. It's kind of neat, you know, you take stuff apart later and see how dirty it's gotten. If it's gotten dirty at all, it's kind of neat to see rather than just putting on black grease. See, look how much longer that's going to last than oil. I can always oil it later. Then with these cams, we're going to grease these things up. Alright, let's go to the next step. Make sure that bearing doesn't slide off the end. These go flat like that. We checked. This is working nice. So let's go to the next step here. It goes like that. Slide that back down in there. We'll screw our bearing plates back on. Okay, we have the drive shaft mounted back down in here. Get the bearing plates on there. Next thing we are going to do, get the spring down in here. Get the spring back down. This guy back into its clips. Okay. When I was rotating this thing, everything seems fine. Seems really good. There it is, clicking. So the cams don't seem to hit at exactly the same time. See, off just by a little bit. I haven't used this before. We're going to see what happens with that. So the 397 coal loader, so far it's kind of thin. It's not really working right. It's moving the coal to one side, so I thought I'd take it apart and look at some of this stuff. One thing that I noticed, you see the play there, and see here it can fall off the cam. See if you can, there, I'll tilt it this way. It falls off the cam. It doesn't seem to do it when it's in the device, in the base. But this thing, I don't really know if they really got this thing right. See all this play here. You know what's going on with this? I looked at the parts diagram. It doesn't look like I'm missing any parts. This one doesn't seem to fall off, but it's right on the edge. I could envision a tube in the middle in here for it to ride on, because the weight of the conveyor pushing down on it, I don't see what it's going to ride on unless it's just riding on the plastic, and then the plastic would be rubbing on this cam. We know how the spring pulling on this thing in here pulls it towards the front. We know how that tension works. But what's this thing? This thing doesn't really have a bearing. What does it ride on? So I don't know if I'm going to put some washers in here. I'm having a hard time getting this thing to work right. I'm kind of worried about this guy. Put it back together one more time. I wanted to show you. Look at all this play. Got it back together. Gonna give it another shot. Look at all the play that we have. And these cams have a ton of play in them, sliding back and forth on that shaft. Get this razor blade in here. But look at how much play. It goes over a lot farther than that. Look at all the play that's got. There's over an 1/8 inch of play. Alright, doing some more adjustments on the 397 coal loader here. I was still trying to get it to operate a little more evenly, and then trying to knock those little pieces in there with the screwdriver that they were telling us to hit, and I didn't get any results. I don't think that they were moving. They're in there pretty tight. The way that it's all pressed together. And the more I looked at it and took it apart and was looking at the way that it operates, it seemed like it was a different kind of problem than moving those things forward or backwards. It seemed like it was a height problem with this. And because it's so loose and it's not running on a bearing or a roller, and it has this play, and the thing kept wiggling around, and I did take it apart, put a couple thin little washers in here to get rid of some of the side-to-side play, and I put a couple thin washers here. You don't want to get it too tight, of course. And I got rid of most of the side-to-side play. It didn't help at all either. But this, when I held this down, it seemed to really help it. And I thought, wow, I'll get a spring and I'll put it on the back here, and I'll hold this down. But the hardware store's closed already. I'd need a 1.5 inch spring here. So what I ended up doing, and I thought, well, it's going to raise the tray and it's going to help the coal go up too, is I'll take this shim. This is about a 3/16 piece of plywood I had sitting around. So I had the best luck with this guy. Put this shim in here, and I'm still experimenting with this thing, but I wanted to show you the progress that I'd gotten. So we're going to set up this car, get this thing set up. We're going to dump some coal, and I'll show you the results. Alright, before we do our test run here with all the final repairs, I'm going to read from the manual here, the repair manual that says, to assure proper operation, the customer must be warned to use only Lionel number 206 artificial coal, which is screened to maintain proper size of particles. Now, I believe what they're trying to tell us, after I did a couple test runs, is the small particles get jammed in this hinge of the door on the side of the car. So once it dumps, it doesn't want to return back. All the large particles have dumped into the tray, and the small particles are stuck, and I'm running the screwdriver back and forth, and I can't get them out of there before this thing's already loading the coal up the chute and into the car. So I think I'm going to screen the coal that I have. I got a couple bags of this stuff, and I think that what they're saying is they want the larger particles only. The smaller stuff is going to cause you problems. So here's about 12 volts. Come on, coal loader. Come on, 397. So it's doing pretty good with that wooden shim under there. pretty even operation. It's a little higher. Starting to fill that top tray. So here we go. Fill her up, buddy. There we go, folks. Here's our 397 Lionel postwar coal loader. I think they make 3 different coal loaders. This one's meant to go underneath the hopper dump coal unloader. It dumps out of the bottom of the hoppers. Hopes you learned something, folks. Thanks for tuning into the Train Zone. Get some repair tips here. We're always learning something. Thanks.